My name is Boyd King. I will be talking about some pruning basics, and I was also asked to talk about tree stress, which is an appropriate subject for us after Snowmageddon in 21. But let me start out by saying I was born in Dallas, but we moved back here when I was 3, and I've been here most of my life ever since. So I've been around a long time. I don't have a horticulture degree of any sort, but I have been through master gardener training. In my mind, it's pretty close. Close as I need, probably. But I have a lot of experience. I've done mowing and landscape maintenance for my whole life. Have had my business, which is Lawn King, and we do a little bit of everything. Since June of '94, running it full time. Started in '83 as a part-time side venture to what I was doing at the time. But anyway, let me start out by asking, does anybody know what you call two guys that hang in front of the window all the time? What their names are? Kurt and Rod. And the other joke I'll tell that's tree related is what is a tree's favorite beverage? Wine. Root beer. So, here we go. Myself and Karen Saunders and Jean Shelhamer have been through the Master Gardener's Advanced Tree Course, which we did by Zoom. And in fact, was it the third session that was supposed to be during the deep freeze, and so many folks that were involved in it across the state were out of power that they put it off a week, and we did it the following Saturday. Weren't they on Saturday?
Yeah.
And so we've been through this, and we're here to share with you some of what we picked up from that, and in my case, also some of what I have learned from dealing with this stuff over my lifetime. And this lady, Courtney Blevins from A&M, is very knowledgeable and very good. And I'm just going to be sharing part of the slides from her PowerPoint, which had 43 slides on it. And so, why prune? And I won't talk. I won't read this to you, but there's handouts, I think, that have these slides available. Pruning is important, and in my opinion, it is important to do it incrementally as you go along, and not try to, 20 years after it should have been started, somebody calls me and says, what can you do for this? And I say, well, I can do something, but I can't do as much as if it had been a progressive effort over time. And you don't really have to prune trees yearly, in my opinion. Every 2 or 3 years is a good idea. You can work with the structure and the shape a lot better if you do it not every 10 years, but more frequently than that. And you want to prune for aesthetics, you want to prune for safety, and you want to prune, stimulate fruit production in the case of fruit trees. And I don't have as much experience with fruit trees as I do other trees. We have a lot of live oak, red oak, a lot of pear, decorative pear trees, which are prone to occluding bark, which is addressed here in a bit. But so, prune for safety, prune for health, and prune for aesthetics is reasons to prune. And I have people that do weekly mowing for different customers, both residential and commercial. And when the trees are down in your face when you're riding on a mower, they're too low. When you can't walk under them, in my opinion, they're too low. I'm not 6 foot, but I run into limbs at times on customers' properties, and I tell them, I sure would like to trim these limbs up for you a bit. And it's better when you trim the limb when it's that big than when it's this big, for sure. But anyway, now this slide is not the best, but it gives you the idea that crown cleaning, which is cleaning out some of the top and then thinning some of the top, Then you can raise the tree up, like what I was just talking, the limbs. One question I would ask is if you have a small tree and it's got a limb that's coming out that's 3 foot off the ground, and the tree grows 6 foot, how high off the ground is that limb going to be? A lot of people are prone to say, well, the math is that low. If the limb is 3 foot off the ground today, and the tree grows 6 feet, when the tree has grown 6 feet, that limb is still going to be 3 feet off the ground because it comes out of the trunk at a spot, and that spot doesn't move. The tree grows from the apical meristem, which is at the tips of the branches and limbs. It grows in diameter, but it doesn't grow up the trunk, as it were. Crown pitting. I don't know if you can see, but the limbs that are suggested to be pruned are in blue, as they've circled right there. So basically, limbs that are headed down, limbs that are headed at a poor angle. If a tree has a limb that's growing pretty close to parallel with the ground, and that limb gets to be huge and 40 feet out there and has a lot of leaves and this, that, and the other, the tree has a hard time holding that limb up. A limb needs to be at a 45-degree angle or greater, hopefully not too great, for the tree to have the mechanical advantage of supporting that weight through its structure, okay? So if you have limbs that are less than 45 degrees, you should consider the idea that as that limb gets bigger and older and heavier, it might give the tree a problem and might at some point split out and cause a wound to the tree, which is not a good thing. Especially if that limb is out over a fence, the neighbor's roof, an outbuilding that you've got, where you park your car, stuff like that. And you just want it. Live oaks tend to have way too many branches, for my taste, inside in the inner part of the tree. So when I trim a live oak tree, or the folks that work for me and I help them, we look at that, and certainly if something is dead on a tree, you need to trim it out. The limb is dead, and they just die for whatever reason. Mostly lack of sunlight, in my opinion. But anyway, like I say, you've got this information to study and read over at your leisure, I believe. So I'm going to read it to you. Oh, I'm trying to advance the slide with the laser pointer. Then crown reduction, which is lowering the height of the tree. A lot of folks are prone to plant a tree somewhere that when the tree gets mature size, it's getting into something like wires that it shouldn't be. And at that point, and once again, you see the blue is what they're suggesting that you can trim on that tree. And it may not be, we say don't pop a tree, which is don't trim from the inside out. We like to trim up, and we like to trim things that are off the main trunks that are going outward at the main trunk. We like to not trim what we call popping or dehorning a tree. My favorite example was and still is, the condominiums, apartments, whatever, at the intersection of Sales and South 27. They have a narrow strip of turf between the curb and the parking lot, and mulberry trees that have been there as long as I can remember. And every year they cut them, at about 10 or 12 feet. Ugliest looking things. Many of them have died. You can go by there today and see why we say don't pop trees. Except when you have snowmageddon and that tree has lost the ends, they're dead. They're gone. And I talked to a number of folks. Bruce Cracker is a friend of mine. I enjoy having Bruce as a reference or a resource. And I talked to some other people, and they said, popping trees isn't the thing, but if you don't want to take out this ash tree that has lost most of its outer branches, and the leaf structure is dead, branches are dead, and it's coming back from the middle, then you do pop that tree, as in take off the dead. You can take off the dead anytime, and a rule of thumb, if you're going to take part of the limb off and you take more than 25 to 30% of the leaf structure, so a quarter to a third of the leaves, if you're taking that off, you probably need to go ahead and take the whole limb off. That just helps the tree be healthy, okay? You take off too much of the leaf structure for that limb, and that limb becomes, in my opinion, a drag on the tree. It's taking more resource to keep that limb alive than the leaves on it can support by doing photosynthesis and putting nutrients back down into the roots for the overall health of the plant. So that's, and that gets us into some things where we say, well, you know, enough of this branch is growing down where we don't want it. And you cannot do that, but if you get to 50%, you really should. 50% of the leaves or more. Crown raising, where you're getting it up away from your face. And y'all see the blue that they're suggesting as to what can be trimmed. And I think that'll show up on your handouts, and that is worth noting. Okay? Okay. Weak branch unions or limbs that are growing too close together. You end up with the bark in between those becoming surrounded, and that's not really the way the trees are healthy or strong in their growth, and can cause weak spots and things and limbs busting out. Okay? You have a lot of that in pear trees. Bradford pears, Cleveland pears, they just want to do this. And I planted a decorative pear for my wife in our front yard. She loves them. We live not far from Aldersgate Methodist, and if you remember, they had the ones on either side of the sanctuary there that were gorgeous most springs over years and years, and she wanted one in our front yard, and I told her, okay, dear, I'll plant this. These trees are susceptible to cotton root rot, which is a soil-borne disease, affects cotton and other plants, and you can go from having a Cleveland pear, Bradford pear, and I think we went from Bradford to Cleveland because Cleveland may be a little less susceptible to this, but the tree will be beautiful and doing great in 2 weeks or less. Every leaf on it is dead. They don't drop off. That's one sign of this disease. And you just lost the plant, okay? And why it waits until the trees are mature and it happens so quickly, I can't explain to you. But I've seen it happen. Customers out on Foothill Road had 3 or 4 of them 1 year that were beautiful trees. Go south, just in a heartbeat, relatively. And that's something to bear in mind. But with a pear tree, if you plant it and it's growing up and it's got these branches that are too close, just take one of them out and go around the tree and do that, and you can help the tree do better than what it will on its own. Now they have a nice globe shape to them, but there are just too many branches in them. And any branch that is crossing another one, and as the wind blows, it creates a wound. You want to get rid of one of those. And the sooner you do that, the less obvious it is that something significant has been taken out of the tree. Because if you let it go too long, then when you take one or the other, you have a hole in the canopy. Okay? Okay. No stub cuts. No cotton. Except when you have to. Okay? Now, this is talking about where to trim a limb off if you're going to trim it. Very important to know. The tree will heal over that wound if you cut it right. It will heal over a lot quicker if you cut it right than if you cut it wrong. And what is wrong? I went to a tree seminar down in San Angelo probably 12, 14 years ago, and John Begnall was the extension agent down there, and he was very much a recognized tree expert. It was an all-day thing. I drove down there. It was great. I'm so glad I did that. John said, the way to trim a tree then is to cut it as close to the main trunk as you can without making a much larger wound. Okay? So you get to a point and you're taking that limb off, and you cut it, and the wound is this big, and you go another quarter to a half inch in, and the wound's this big, okay? That's too big. You don't want to do that. And it all has to do with the branch bark ridge, which is, let's see here. I believe this right here is the branch bark ridge. You can kind of see it over here. It's right along there. And so just outside of the branch bark ridge is where it's saying to cut. Any questions about that? Does that seem understandable enough to you? Okay. And this goes into it a little more depth. And you don't want it to be just perfectly smooth up. You want it to stick out a little bit, and then the tree grows what's called callus tissue, and it just covers over that wound in a few years. Painting the wounds. Do we have to paint? Well, they used to say if it's above a certain size, you have to go ahead and paint it. Better for the tree. Now they say don't. Except for live oaks and red oaks, which are susceptible to oak wilt. Oak wilt is a disease of the tree that will kill it, and it can be transmitted. 15%, they say, of the new cases of oak wilt in live oaks or red oaks are from the oak wilt virus, which is transmitted by a beetle called a Nitsendula beetle. Red oaks form a fungal mat under the bark when they have this disease. And these beetles are attracted to the smell or the scent of that fungal mat. They go, they root around, they eat, I guess, I don't know. And then they come out and they smell a wound on another tree, and they go to investigate that. If that wound on another tree is a pruning wound by the owner of that tree, or a wind damage, something, a little sap oozes out, the beetle smells it, he goes, he eats on that sap, whatever. That disease pathogen is transmitted from the infected tree to the non-infected tree. Live oak and red oak, any wound that you make in the tree, even if it's just skipping across the bark a little bit with the saw, trying to get, to where you want to cut or whatnot, needs to be covered up in some way. That seals that wounded tissue just a little bit, and that helps keep that disease from being transmitted by the beetle. And when to transmit or when to prune those trees, the heat of the summer or the dead of the winter. And that has changed and gone back and forth over the years a lot. But now they say those two times because, guess what? That's when that beetle is the least active. They don't like the severe cold, they don't like the severe heat. I bet they're unhappy this summer. What do you think? Okay. Okay. And then when you trim a limb, you know where to cut it, okay? So you put the saw up there. If it's a powered saw, you put it there, you start cutting, okay? And you get far enough down that limb, and the weight of the limb causes it to drop. Well, if you haven't made an undercut to prevent it, when that limb drops, it can rip the bark down below where you're wanting to cut. A good ways. You'd be surprised. So you make an undercut first, which is the A, and then you can take the weight of that limb off, which is the B cut, and then you come back, and with the weight of that limb off, you're able to cut where you want to cut, and that weight is not working against you so much. Okay? So that right there is very important. Anybody wants to trim their own tree. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
So it doesn't matter like what size limb, or is it of a certain, like if you're using a chainsaw or what?
You know, if I would say anything bigger than your little finger, if there's enough weight on that limb for it to want to fall and rip, and it depends on how old the limb is, because an older limb will have thicker bark, which is a little harder, as it were. And it depends on what kind of tree, because fruit trees, immature pecan trees, pear trees, decorative pears, they have a lot thinner, more fragile bark structure, okay? And so they're more prone to this on a fairly decent sized limb than are pecan trees or mesquite trees or, bigger oak trees. Okay?
So how far do I go in? When you said you cut it in?
Okay.
You're talking about the undercut before you cut further out?
Yes.
I would say a third of the way through the branch from beneath. That way, if by chance when you're cutting, it tries to drop, it will not go all the way back to the trunk. It'll try to break right there or rip, and you've already undercut it, so basically it'll just drop and stop. Has been my experience. Okay? Okay. I believe this is our final slide. How roots grow. I understand, or been told, that there is as much root structure below the ground as there is above the ground for the tree, or what you see above the ground, there's as much below the ground as that. And most of us just don't have a clue because we haven't ever seen that like we have the top, okay? And so, don't park your vehicles under the trees. That compresses the ground, that makes moisture absorption. The roots have to have oxygen, which has to be transmitted through space in between the soil particles. When you park under it, that just compacts it. That affects the health of your tree after a point. Okay? It talks about the feeder roots. I'll tell you one other thing that John Degnoff said in his seminar that stuck with me to this day. You have people that come in and say, oh, I've got this probe and I've got this pressure pump and I've got this tank and we're going to deep root feed your this, that, or the other. His take on it is that most of the nutrient pickup, moisture and nutrient pickup is by the feeder roots, which are in the top foot of the soil. The tree does have roots. Different trees do it differently. That go down a lot deeper than that. They're for anchoring the tree, not so much for picking up nutrients and this, that, and the other. Okay? And so he said you can just feed your tree by putting the same fertilizer that you're putting on your grass under the tree. And I've always had great luck with it. Okay? Because now, the one advantage that I've heard about possibly this injection technique, aerating your turf, okay, with a machine that maybe takes a plug out of the ground that's that deep, if you're lucky, and the ground's uniformly moist and not too much clay in it, okay? That lets moisture, oxygen, and nutrients, fertilizer, get into the root zone of that grass a lot easier. Well, I've heard it said that doing this around the roots of your tree actually kind of aerates around the roots of that tree and can provide some benefit, but I don't think the benefit is there from injecting fertilizer, as it were, nutrient for the tree down below these feeder roots like they're showing in this picture. Okay? Any questions about that? Oh, I'm sorry. That's not the last slide. We added one. Danielle, is there a way to get it to go back?
He needs to go back one slide.
There's a back arrow under.
Back arrow here.
No.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Here are some resources. And I haven't spent a lot of time going through these, but when I saw this, which was in a file of mine that I was pulling out some information to get ready for this presentation, I looked at that and I thought, that would probably be worthwhile for me to go look at. So there it is for y'all to go look at it if you care to. Yes, ma'am.
We can email the bigger version of that out. So you guys might split, since it's a multiple slide page. Okay?
I just thought it was my poor eyes and I couldn't read it.
It's about 2 font on the printout.
Okay. Oh, so on the printout, it's really smaller still?
But if you didn't put your email address on it, I need that.
Okay. So, I think that concludes what I was presenting to you, but I would like.
I'm going to talk about the kind of plants. Now, I'm operating under the assumption that most of us have clay soil. And I don't know that I really knew what clay soil was for a long time. It was my idea it was something like caliche or something, or some funny color. But in Abilene, most of it in town is clay soil. And what that means, it's just a real dense soil. And I, over my years and stupidity, have killed some trees, watering them too much because they were in clay soil, and the clay just held the water better than I was thinking it was. Anyway, but in order to plant a tree, you've gone to the nursery, or you have a friend that's given you a tree, or you've gone someplace and dug up a tree. We're going to dig a hole to put the tree in. And what's the hole going to look like? And basically, it's bowl shaped. It's wider at the top than it is at the bottom. And we need to dig it. We need to at least loosen the soil, or make the soil loose for maybe even a foot below where we want to set the tree. And when we set the tree in, the hole will be an extra foot at least on either side of the tree in width. And then we're going to put that same dirt back around the tree. And I didn't know this for a long time either, because I would go back what I thought was good soil and give the trees a better chance. But what they tell us is that the tree will survive and do better if the tree is in the same soil that it's surrounded with the rest of the soil. So what you do, you put the same soil back. And when you're planting that tree, you want to plant it maybe a couple of inches above grade. In other words, don't plant it too low. There's a root bulge there on any tree, and you want that to show a little bit. So maybe 2 or 3 inches above the grade of your yard that you'll want to plant that tree, and using the same soil that you planted. And then because the tree was of some size, you have some extra dirt. What you want to do is to mound that around the tree, and then add your mulch in that up next to the tree, and then where you can water it. But don't mound the. I see this really bad in the metroplex, and I'm not sure what their thinking is, and they may know more than I probably do. But there are a lot of places where they we call it volcanoing up, so they've actually built the mulch up higher up next to the tree than they have out on the ground. But that's not the way we understand doing it. We need to actually even let it dip a little bit, but have the root bulge exposed, and then with that, the mulch. The mulch helps control the weeds. It helps control the heat underneath it, so that it's not quite as hot as it is, or quite as cold as it is elsewhere. And then the main thing it does is hold the moisture in and keep moisture from going away as fast as it would if you didn't have that. And if you use, and I really think that ideal use of the mulch is a wood mulch or a pine mulch or something like that, and not the rubber. The rubber doesn't break down, but the mulch that does break down will be part of the nutrients for the tree. So it's a positive thing. We're going to plant this tree, we're going to plant it above grade, we'll fill the hole in, and then before we do anything else, we're going to water it. Okay? And even when we'll water it, probably before we set the tree down in there, so that it's not sitting in water, but it is watered. And then we put the mulch in, and then we water it. Some say water it again the next day. Some say water it 3 days. You can tell when it needs water, but you will water it soon. You don't plant the tree and go off and leave it and expect it to do well without some additional help. Any questions about that? Okay. What kind of tree? What kind of tree are we going to plant? Well, some of the trees that do well in the avenue area are the desert willow and the chase tree, and that's also called the vitex. The Chenopin oak, the bur oak, the Texas redbud, the Mexican oak, or the Monterey oak, the Afghan pine, Texas mountain laurel, live oak, sugar oak, Chinese pistache, and then the tree of Texas, which is the pecan tree. And of course, there are many different kinds of pecans, and the nurseryman will tell you which ones work best. And then when you go buy a tree, you're going to buy a tree that's either in a container, and you've seen these in the nursery or wherever, or they have been dug up from someplace and they're in a big ball, and then they're covered with burlap, and that's called a B&B tree. Or you have some trees be okay just pulled up or dug up, bare rooted and ready to put the soil. The only ones that I have found for me, which doesn't mean a lot, but the ones that I've found that work okay with the bare oak with the pecan trees. Boyd has talked a little bit about the oak wilt, and you've got to be awfully careful with that. You drive out through the hill country or even closer than that and see groups of trees that have just died, and they die kind of from the top up, and that's a reflection of the oak wilt that he was talking about. And it is in Abilene, Texas, so if you have those trees, plant them at the right time, which everybody has a different idea, but at least get the coldest time of the year or the hottest time of the year, and always paint the leaves. The other thing I wanted to talk about is where are we going to put the tree? Landscapers have different ideas about where a home builder about where we're going to put that tree. We need 2 trees in the front yard, and we need this or that or whatever. Anyway, some people choose to put trees to the side of the house so it kind of frames the house or lets you see the house. And other folks say, well, I want that tree so it shades the house, so it helps with the heat and the cold and that sort of thing. So you just have to decide where you want the tree. But one of the things you do want to do is have it in a place that has enough sunlight, particularly those, and there are trees that require more sun than others. Be conscious about how the wind blows and so on, so that you put the tree in the spot again that's good for the tree and good for you. You dig the wrong size hole. Bruce Cropper used to talk about the guy that out there that digs a 6-foot hole for a relatively small tree, and that's probably not necessary either. So, but you do need to dig one large enough that gives the roots a chance to spread and particularly with clay soil, it is hard. If I go dig a hole in clay soil, I get a starter hole, and then I go run my water hose and fill it up, and then go back the next day or two and finish digging the hole. It's just, the soil is just that hard. And then when are we going to plant the tree? The best time to plant a tree is between November and March. Now, if you're buying a container tree, you can plant that one almost any time, because that's one that's kind of has its own soil, and it's well established, and it's going to the ground. But if it's a bag of burlap or a bare root, you want to plant it in the cooler time of the year. This recommendation is from November to March. And another thing is fertilizing the tree too early. And I know I've been guilty of this, even putting root starter down or a type of fertilizer in with the tree right when I fertilize it, thinking that it needs some food, But apparently what happens is the fertilizer that we put in, if we do it too soon, it works on the weeds and helping the weeds grow, but it doesn't help the roots much. And really, right initially, we're trying to establish the roots of the tree so we can have a good sturdy tree for the rest of the duration. And you want to water the tree, but you don't want to water it too much. I had 2 pretty nice trees that I lost, thinking primarily because I had reseeded the grass around them. I was guilty of having the canopy not up high enough so that it didn't get sun on the grass. So I reseeded raised the canopy, reseeded the grass, and then watered it daily. And then the trees died, and then when the guys came out and dug the trees up to replace the trees, they said, well, look, there's water standing underneath this thing. What have you done? Well, I watered the grass every day and managed to kill the tree. The tree needs water, but it needs oxygen as well. So you water the tree as needed, but not overwater. Are there any questions?
How can you tell if you overwater it?
Well,
Besides digging it up and seeing the water.
easiest thing, I think, is if it has mulch on it. I like to see the mulch float, but not float away. So I think when you water it and you can see the mulch kind of moving around, then probably that's adequate for that period of time.
So when would be a good time to fertilize after you planted a tree?
I think probably a couple of months, 3 months, maybe something like that. And just fertilize it as, don't go over there and pour the whole bag out. But, just fertilize it moderately, and then much like you might in your yard. Of course, there's special fertilizers for trees, and they give indications about how much to use and when best to use it. Yes, ma'am.
Sometimes when you buy a tree in a pot, like this larger pot, and it's been in that pot too long, you see the roots starting to go around.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you take care of those roots when you plant a tree?
Well, get it out of the pot.
Yeah.
And then it's nice to go in and probably you will make some cuts in those roots around, and then untangle it as much as you can. Otherwise, you set the tree in there and you, even with any plant, if you go and look at it, when you are buying something, you look at it, pick it up out of the pot and look at it, and if it's really circling or girdling itself, it's been in there too long. So you need to help it comb those roots out. If you need to, cut them there or something, but make it where it can go find nutrients out of the soil and wouldn't just keep going around itself, because eventually it goes around itself and it just dies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have two subjects to cover this morning, and I'm going to do the one on fruit trees. How many of you have fruit trees? How many are having success with those fruit trees, especially this year?
Yes.
Well, good. I'm glad somebody is. I think you've heard all the discussion about how to plant and the care it takes to get these fruit trees in the ground. The old adage of you get what you pay for, and when we're buying fruit trees, we're buying a big investment. So we should take that little bit of extra time to do some homework on what it's going to take to grow those trees. On the one handout that I gave you, it tells you that the Texas Agriculture Extension Service has prepared this list for chilling hours and the cultivars that they recommend for this area. I would further follow that up by, when you purchase that tree, take a tablet with you and talk to the nurseryman or the grower. In this case, Womax, which is out in De Leon, has bare root. And he will talk to you about how to plant those properly and how to start them. Bare roots are not, to me, are not as simple as a lot of your other trees, your container plants and your burlaps. But that brings us to those types of trees. When you have your container plant, like Jean said, you can keep that in the container for a while. So if you get a tree in a container now and you're not going to plant it till then, again, you're going to talk to the person and find out what's the best way to care for them, because you're going to water them differently and take care of them differently while they're in the pots or the burlaps, and in this case, the bare roots. Now, I'm fairly sure that Womax does not sell beyond March or April of the year the bare root stock, because, especially for spring, because you don't want to plant them in the spring, you want to plant them in the fall. And does anybody know, John, do you know if Womax is open in September, October?
No idea.
Okay, and that's one place to go. We try not to give you advertisement for anyone in particular, but right now I'm thinking the only reason I'm doing this is because they're the only ones that are carrying a lot of the bare roots. You can buy container plant for Lowe's, Home Depot, some of the other local nurseries here. But again, talk to these people and follow the recommendations by Texas Agriculture. All of us probably, if we were to take a soil test, would come up with probably as many people are in this room test for what you have in your soil. Those soil tests are important because some of your trees will grow not too badly in sand loam. Others of them will have a hard time in clay. And again, when you're talking to the individuals, you'll find out what's the best type of soil to put them in, where to put them, whether they're going to be in full sun. Some of these trees will take a little bit more shade than others. And so you want to follow those instructions. They recommend here that you get the burlap, bare root, or what have you, because you have the seeds from the pecan tree in your yard, which grow by themselves. I think they're called volunteers. I don't know is there any better or any worse than what's already there. I have a native one, and those native pecans are so small, they're not even worth messing with. But somebody told me pigs like them. I don't know. I might offer them to my next door neighbor. But there are several of the especially the pecan trees that grow very well in very different areas. How many have pecans? Are you getting a good quantity of nuts from them?
It's just a little volunteer on nursing right now.
Oh, okay. Anybody else getting them? So see, that's, and the growing season, my understanding, is every 2 years. But what starts the 2 years? And right now, with all the stress we've got going, they may never run out again. Okay. On this list down here, we have given you a rough idea of some of the trees and nuts that you can grow within this area. These are suggestions of times and what have you. And again, I'm saying please talk to your nurseryman to find out. Now, not wanting to sound biased or anything, Lowe's and Home Depot don't necessarily have people who are well versed in some of these. They have some knowledge on them. I won't say they don't. We had one of our graduates from Master Gardeners was one there, and it was a godsend to have her at Lowe's. But that's why I'm suggesting you go to someone who's got some more knowledge about these. It's an investment. It costs money, but it also costs time, and there's nothing worse than to get that hole dug, get that baby in there, and just watch it shrivel. And in this weather, I've got plants that are still sitting in my greenhouse that I'm babying because I'm afraid to put them out. I've got figs I won't put out yet. And because I know what's going to happen. Last year I put 2 in the ground, only 1 came up. But I'm an optimist. Throw water at it, it's going to grow. And that proves true in some cases, because what I found out is the one fig that I had that had died ostensibly came back. But it didn't come back till June. Now why it took so long to come back, I don't know, but I didn't question it, I'm still babying it. And when you're babying it because of this heat that we're having, the old guy, using your finger to reach down, if it's dry that far down in the soil, go ahead and water it. That's true to a point, but I go a little bit further. I have gotten religion with a water meter because I did the thing, I overwatered, I underwatered, and I got tired of losing plants, and I thought, I've got to have a happy medium there, so I use the water meter, and it goes a little bit deeper, because in my soil where I am, I'm off of Elmdale Road, and I'm in an old pipe yard, and they have a lot of gravel on top of that clay, mixed with a little bit of sand, and it's a mess for what I've got, so I can't depend on just the finger and the soil trick. So I use the water meter on that, and that'll give you a little bit more. And you're going to fertilize your fruit trees a little bit differently. And in some cases, they will tell you don't fertilize any of them until they're at least a year old. Your watering, they tell you, until the tree is established. That's not 2 weeks, not 2 months necessarily. It can be a full year. So again, do your homework, sit down, and the things that give you problems now, or you're getting ready to purchase one and you have no place to start, do a little bit more homework, take this list with you, and we've given you several places to start with agriculture to go to their webpage, and they will give you the trees listed alphabetically, and your shrubs and your berries also. And go in and take a look at those, and if you have questions, they have a phone number there that you can call them and actually get feedback from them directly. Call out here to our extension office. We have some people out there that are very knowledgeable in some of these, that have grown them personally and are in various different places here in the Abilene area and Callahan County and Jones. The Master Gardeners have a hotline or a call line, if you will, and if you call the office and the people there that answer the phone don't know, they'll put you in touch with one of us that have been listed as having qualifications, if you will, and knowledge about some of these plants that you're going to plant. Berries, I have blackberries. I have a fence full of blackberries. I have beautiful, beautiful plants out there. I had 3,000 buds on there. I got my first crop of berries and they were dead in 2 days because the heat came up so suddenly and it just took them right out, just like that. And it's frustrating when you've gotten all of this work done and just to have to die like that. But it's the nature of our beast this year, is the last 2 years, having to put up with all this heat. Again, it's the luck of the draw. I don't know whether it's correct or not. John, you could correct me. I went in and I took most of my berry bushes down. I left them about that tall because the water is feeding nothing. Because you've got all these beautiful branches and what have you. There's nothing on them, there's no berries, there's no flowers, and they're not going to berry again this year. So I took mine down to put more strength into the roots. John, is that reasonable?
Sounds good to me. I'm not a real berry person, so I couldn't tell you one way or the other.
Anybody else have any suggestions or experience with berries? Yes, sir.
Commercially, once the crop is done, they trim them back
Yeah.
and let them go dormant to build for the following year.
How far back?
You know, the one thing you have to remember, if you're growing fruit, you know, you gotta think of it like a commercial process. It's not an ornamental tree. You can't irrigate them the same way, you can't fertilize them the same way, you can't prune them the same way. You know, every one is different. And you have to take that into account when you're growing any of these fruit trees. You can't just put it out there and let Mother Nature irrigate it for you. If you want fruit, you can't. You got to look at, pests. You got to look at all of that differently. And so, I mean, all that information is out there to the specific type of fruit that you're growing. There's guys that commercially make a living doing this, and it's pretty easy to find if you're looking for it. But that's the one thing, you just can't put it in the ornamental backyard and put a fruit tree and expect it to all be the same.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. No, that's why I said, talk to your nurserymen. Because they know where they should be planted and the care of them. And it's homework. And this is where just putting the flowers in the ground and having nice flowers is nice to have. And if you lose it, you don't get too excited about it or too disappointed because you can plant something else there. But if you're putting all this investment into the trees and the berries, you really do need to do your homework on that. And be prepared to invest yourself in taking care of them because they won't take care of themselves for the most part. The berries, after they're a few years older, will be a little bit easier to take care of. But the trees, I've got one peach tree, and it did the same thing. The freeze got it, and that was even after I wrapped it with barrier cloth, and it died back. And dear Lord, please let it come up again, and it did. And I've got, it came back up, and it's doing fairly well. And I'm hoping that what it did during this period is it's gotten stronger in its roots. But next year will tell, because several people have made the comment that just because the tree looks a little bit dead now, don't necessarily throw the baby out with the bathwater, because their cycle's been interrupted. So I've been watering a lot of my plants as if. And we'll see what happens next spring. Now, if they come up and they're dead sticks, well, there's your proof to the pudding. Pull it up and start all over again. But don't pull it up immediately because, like I said, my fig didn't start putting out any leaves until June. And you would have expected a lot earlier than that. But we were hit with heat fairly quickly, too. And it affects the ground. I know that I've got a water pipe that's going from my garage to the greenhouse. It's 4 feet under the ground, and I get hot water. So you know that if the ground is hot enough to heat that PVC pipe to give me hot water, not tepid, I'm talking hot water, the roots are stressed in a lot of our trees and things. And again, watching the water, but again, don't overwater. And I don't know, I wish Boyd was here to answer the question, but When you give your trees that deep but infrequent water, how much is infrequent right now with the fact that the wind is taking the moisture out of the ground? The ground is drying up faster than we can keep up with it. And that's why I say I've got that water program. I'm going in there all the time, just trying to make sure that I'm not losing a lot of water out of them. But the other thing is that when you water dries out, you're stressing the tree even further. So water is important, but I can't even begin to tell you how to take care of it. That's why I say go ask them. Do we have any other suggestions, comments, corrections to something I may have said that I can learn from? John?
Check Womac's website. They're officially listed as open right now,
Okay.
but their online store shows everything is sold out, so they may not be selling right now.
Which reminds me, we are going to be having a plant sale in October, and we are attempting to locate trees now. And because of the frost, because of the pandemic, because of a lot of other things that are beyond the grower's control, we don't have a lot of trees out there anywhere. We've gone as far as other states to buy trees when we've been able to, but we don't know how many we're going to get, and neither do the growers. And they're getting very few in, so they're, like John said, they're sold out right now. Don't know when they're going to get any more in. Was it last year, right in the middle of the pandemic, because people were sick, they didn't have people to work, we lost the capability of getting pots, of all things. So the growers, without the pots, couldn't grow the plants. Therefore, at our plant sale, we didn't have as many as we want. Jackie, do we know what we're looking at right now for the fall plant sale?
We're looking at availability list and some new growers, so
Okay.
we're trying.
Yeah, because a lot of our old growers just, they don't have the wherewithal, they don't have the supplies. And it's a supply line thing, it's costing them. There's a lot going on out here, so we may be forced back to good old-fashioned seeds. Yes?
You mentioned the water meter earlier.
Yes?
Where do you get those?
You can get those almost anywhere. Walmart's got them, Lowe's has them, Garden World.
I think they may be called moisture meters.
Moisture meters? Okay. And some of them come with 2 probes, some of them come with 1. The 2 probes gives you a pH and a heat, and the other one gives you water. And, yes, sir?
How does it read water?
It tells you whether it's dry or wet. And it tells you on a scale of 1 to 10, and if you're at 10, you may have overwatered.
How long?
They're about, what, 8 inches?
Yeah, about 8 inches.
About 8 inches, yeah. And,
If you're dealing with trees, that's not enough.
pardon?
I said, if you're dealing with trees, that's not enough.
Yeah,
You need to be 2 or 3 foot long.
okay.
You can, here locally, I don't know if Denmark has it, but Ewing does, they have moisture soil tensiometers,
Okay,
which are, all of, from nurseries to commercial growers use.
okay.
Tensiometer is kind of a generic name, there's a whole bunch of them from, electronic ones like you're looking at, but a true one, it just reads the soil tension, because clay soil will hold 5 to 6 inches of water per foot, sand will hold about 2. So, knowing what you have and knowing how deep you are and where you're at, that's a great way. Now, if you're just dealing with the yard, it's sometimes hard to deal with. But if you're looking at monitoring trees and things like that, you need to know if you're overwatering and how deep you are.
That's all right, no, please, all information is welcome. No, we need all the information we can prescribe, yes.
Okay, I have a Granny Smith dwarf tree. It just started blooming last week. That's not normal. And so, has anybody had that experience right now going on?
Wow.
Last week.
It's way out of cycle.
I know it is. It kind of freaked me out. I said, look, that tree is blooming. Because
Mine
was, you know, even my fruit trees, my peaches and my apricots bloomed, but didn't give me anything at all this year. But like I said, last week it started, or earlier this weekend, I can't remember, it was started blooming, and it's still blooming, so. Any,
Call somebody who knows.
don't know if I'm having any problem with it.
Yeah, because it's, yeah,
I mean, I have to find, here it's been in the hundreds, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden it's blooming.
yeah.
What are they going to do?
And the peaches, my peaches are probably about 1.5 inches long, about half the thing wide, and they're just hanging on the tree. They're not ripening, they're not doing anything, they're just there. And I don't know, do I want to?
No, but that's exactly, that was a question I had, that's exactly what my
Yeah.
peaches are doing.
But again, stress. And now, I have a dead stump that has a peach tree growing out of it. It's a new one. And the stump, the tree should have fallen over years ago, but because it's anchored to the base of that old tree, it's still there. And I don't know why, but it gives me big, beautiful peaches every year, except this year. And they're nice and juicy and everything else, but why that thing hasn't fallen over, I have no clue. But, and I avoided this year, the frost came before I got blossoms on it. So I was lucky to even get the peaches this year, because in years past, I know I haven't gotten anything. But it's just one of those weird years. And the other thing that I would recommend is when you're starting off with something new, until you get used to whether it's a shrub, a tree, annuals, whatever, if you really want to get invested in this, keep a diary, especially for trees, because you don't know. Like she said, hers is just now blooming. So what's going to come of this? She's not going to know the next year. Mine, the peaches will eventually fall off. I've noticed the wind has been taking some of them down. But who knows what's going to happen. But a diary like that will give you some sense of what's going on. And the other thing is, a diary also helps with watering. Yeah, sir? You said? Oh, I thought you got it.
Oh, I was gonna say, I take the fruit off just to eliminate pest issues.
Okay.
I wouldn't leave the paint in there. It's just kind of like,
I don't think they're gonna get wrapped now.
No, I know they aren't.
It's just like he was talking about removing the dead bark.
Right?
It's a harbor for pests and all kinds of disease. The fruit, the same way, get it off.
Okay.
You know, it's, whether it's nut crops, you know, whatever, pecans, you know, almonds the same way, but they're all right here. Then you remove all of those partially developed or, you know, fruit that didn't get picked off. Otherwise, you're going to have a big, big chance of getting disease on the tree.
Good idea. Yeah, John?
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing, but it's also, it's adding stress to the tree. Tree's trying to put some energy into that fruit, what it can, but since it's already stressed, it doesn't have enough to put it in, so if you cut the fruit off, it can just keep that energy to itself, to keep itself alive during this stress time.
I know what I'm doing this afternoon. All right, yes.
Does anybody know who is selling strawberries right now? I
Yeah,
haven't seen anybody selling them.
they don't this time of year. But Breckenridge, H&H in Breckenridge sells them in the spring.
Yeah.
That's not the time to plant them.
Tell me about it. It's not time to plant rhubarb either, but they always have them in the spring. And I have asked both of them if they couldn't get rhubarb in the fall and the strawberries. And I had 2 beds of 20 plants apiece. And it didn't make any difference how much water or how much cover I put on them. I couldn't keep them because they need. And I'm going to do something differently about them next time, or next year. But for the time being, I've lost them. And I don't know if we can call a couple of these nurseries and ask them if they could get them in, because surely there's gotta be somebody. I told my sister I wanted her to send me some from Alaska, because I know I can get them from her. But I don't know if they come through the mail with the FDA and everybody else on their case. But I don't know if any of the growers around who are actually carrying those in the fall.
Well, I know there's some growers up in the Lubbock area that have them, but I don't think they sell them out to the public. So I don't know if anybody, you or anybody else in this area.
What'd you
We're
say?
looking for some sources.
Oh, okay. Good enough. Okay, the only other thing I have left to do is this Texas heat, and I think you can read most of this for yourself. But it's talking about stressing the plants, and how to take care of a lot of the items that you're growing at the house. And one of the things that we didn't mention, I didn't mention anyway, was that a soil test, we recommend it usually when you're growing most of your perennials and your grasses and your things like that, but sometimes the fruit trees get left out in this. But a soil test will tell you what kind of soil you've got, if you need to make some amendments to it, if what trees you want to plant there are not going to grow in that particular type soil, and that's another one of those tools in your bag of tricks when you're spending that much money to find out if a tree's going to grow there to begin with. For a lot of the people in town, you get what they call builder's soil. They dug up somebody else's yard, dumped it on that lot that you're on so that they could build the other house, and they keep going down the way, and pretty soon you've got 50 different varieties of soil in your own backyard. Whereas those of us who live out in the country who haven't had to disturb soil have a totally different type. So it wouldn't hurt to get a soil test, and we have the bags and the information available over at the extension office. And what is it, Jackie, $10, $12 to have it done?
Yeah, it would depend, you know,
Okay.
when you, and there are different types. You can have your yard, if you live out of town, you can have pastures, so there are like 6 different types.
Okay. And so you can have the soils read, and they'll tell you if you need anything or you've got too much of something else and how to tamper it. And those are always a good deal. Yeah. Oh, I thought I saw somebody's hand.
Where's the location of the extension office?
1982 Lytle Way. It's on the fairgrounds. You're familiar with the fairgrounds? And you go into gate 5. And then when you go through gate 5, it's you take a right from the building straight ahead of you. It's where we have some of the other events that we put on for the Master Gardeners.
And gate 5 is off of the 322 access road is the easiest way to get to gate 5. By that First Financial Pavilion, you'll have to see it going past there. That's definitely the easiest way to get up close to the office.
Yeah, well, it'll tell you to take the Cross Plains and Airport off-ramp, and when you get down to the bottom here, take a left under the overpass and take a left to go back around, and you'll come to the gate over there. And it tells you that it's the extension office over there. And yeah, we mentioned that. And then, again, the heat is bad for us, bad for the plants. And this is going to be a test of wills to see how we overcome this. Any other questions? Any suggestions? Any more comments? Oh, yes, we have to do a promotion here. Master Gardeners has been having Saturday seminars. It's the last Saturday of every month through August. And our next one up is Seed Savers Unite. And we're going to get together on how to harvest and store seeds. We're going to attempt to start a seed library in conjunction with this library. And we would like a lot of people to come and give us some suggestions and maybe leave us a list, Jackie, of the kind of seeds they have that maybe we can tap these resources.
We're in the process of getting seeds together, so people who come to the seminar, everybody's gonna leave with a packet of seeds. You know, we're looking